In the dim glow of a fading age, whispers of destiny drifted across the Aegean Sea. A single spark, a stolen queen, radiant Helen had ignited a fire that would engulf nations. Kings, bound by oaths and honor, sharpened their blades and summoned their armies. From the halls of Sparta to the towers of Mycenae, the call to war thundered like a storm rolling across the horizon. Troy, proud and unyielding, stood like a jewel upon the plains, its walls kissed by the gods themselves. Within those walls lay not just riches, but defiance, daring the Greeks to test their strength. The gods, watching from Olympus, had already taken sides, their immortal rivalries spilling into mortal veins. Men would fight, bleed, and die, not knowing where the winds howled, ships gathered, and hearts trembled at the thought of what was to come. It would not be a mere clash of swords, but a struggle that would echo through eternity, where heroes would rise, legends would be born, and the world would. Before the great war of Troy erupted, fate was already weaving its threads at the foot of Mount Ida, not far from the proud city itself. There lived a young shepherd named Paris, barely in his 20s, and blessed with striking beauty. Each day, he led his flock into the meadows and forests, living a life of peace and freedom. One early morning, as the mist still veiled the valley in there were no mortals but goddesses of Olympus: Hera, wife of Zeus, queen of power and marriage; Athena, goddess of wisdom and war; and Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty. They carried with them a golden apple inscribed with the words, "For the fairest." Each believed herself worthy and none would yield. To settle the quarrel, they demanded that Paris act as judge. But the origins of this apple stretched back to the wedding of Thetis, a sea goddess, and the mortal king Peleus. Every god had been invited except Eris, the goddess of strife. Angered by the insult, Eris hurled the golden apple into the feast. The rivalry it sparked. One by one, the goddesses attempted to bribe him. Hera promised him dominion over all kingdoms. Athena offered unmatched wisdom and glory in war. But Aphrodite smiled and whispered, "Choose me, and the most beautiful woman in Greece will fall deeply in love with you." Being young and unambitious, Paris was moved by the promise of love, not power or honor. He handed the apple to Aphrodite, a choice that seemed harmless at the time, yet it lit the fuse of a war that would burn for generations. Years later, Paris was welcomed back to Troy. The world discovered that the shepherd boy was in fact a lost prince, son of King Priam. When he was born, his sister Cassandra, blessed by Apollo with the gift of prophecy, had foreseen that he would bring ruin to Troy. Out of fear, Priam had sent the infant away to be raised in secret. But Apollo's later curse on Cassandra ensured that although she spoke the truth, no one would believe her. Thus, when Paris returned, no one stopped him. Meanwhile, in Greece, Helen of Sparta was famed as the most beautiful woman alive. Her beauty drew kings and princes from every land, each vying for her hand. Her father, King Tyndareus, feared that choosing one suitor would provoke war with the others. It was Odysseus of Ithaca, shrewd and cunning, who offered a solution. He proposed that all suitors swear an oath to defend Helen's marriage, no matter who she chose, and to protect her husband's honor against. In return, Odysseus asked only for Penelope, Tyndareus's niece, as his wife. The king agreed, and the suitors swore the solemn vow, the oath of Tyndareus. Helen chose Menelaus, prince of Mycenae, who soon became king of Sparta. For years, the oath seemed unnecessary until the day Paris arrived. Invited as a guest, he was received with honor. Yet, under the spell of Aphrodite and armed with her enchanted girdle that made him irresistible, Paris seduced Helen. Together they fled Sparta, taking not only the queen but also treasures of gold and silver, leaving behind Menelaus's infant daughter, her mother. When Menelaus discovered the betrayal, his fury was boundless. He had welcomed Paris as a friend, yet the Trojan had stolen his wife, his honor, and his wealth. Without delay, Menelaus sought the aid of his brother Agamemnon, the mighty king of Mycenae. For Agamemnon, this was the perfect pretext he had long awaited. Troy controlled the passage between the Aegean and the Black Sea, the lifeline of trade between Europe, Asia, and Africa. To conquer Troy, invoking the oath of Tyndareus, Agamemnon sent word across Greece. All who had once sworn before the gods now were bound by honor to act. Princes, warriors, and kings rallied their forces. What began as the theft of a queen now became a clash of pride, power, and ambition. The drums of war thundered, and 1,000 ships gathered. Thus began the 10-year siege of Troy, one of the greatest wars ever told, born not only of desire and betrayal, but of fate itself. While all of Greece still buzzed with outrage over Helen's abduction, on the quiet island of Ithaca, Odysseus enjoyed peaceful days with his wife Penelope and their newborn son, Telemachus. Life seemed destined for serenity until duty came knocking. One morning, envoys from Mycenae arrived, bearing a summons from King Agamemnon. Odysseus read the letter. Why should I, who have no special bond with Menelaus, abandon my beloved wife and infant son, and drag the men of Ithaca into a meaningless war, he muttered. The irony stung. It was he who had devised the oath of Tyndareus, the very vow now binding. Unwilling to answer the call, Odysseus feigned madness. He dressed in rags, yoked an ox and a donkey together, and sowed his fields with salt while muttering nonsense. Word of this ruse reached Palamedes, a clever prince sent by Agamemnon to oversee the summons. Palamedes was not easily fooled. To test him, he placed baby Telemachus directly in front of Odysseus' plow. At once, the father broke his act and swerved to save his child, exposing the deception. Thus, when Odysseus arrived in Mycenae, Agamemnon welcomed him and asked, "The armies are gathering. Tell me, how can we hope to take mighty Troy?" Odysseus calmly replied, "With Achilles, son of the mortal king Peleus and the sea goddess Thetis, was fated to be the greatest hero of his age, but also doomed to a short life, destined to die young on a far-off battlefield. To shield him, Thetis had dipped the infant in the sacred waters of the river Styx, rendering his body invulnerable save for the heel by which she held him. Thus was born the legend of the Achilles heel. Fearing the prophecy, Thetis later disguised her son as a girl and hid him among the daughters of King Lycomedes on the island of Skyros. There, under the name Pyrrha, the red-haired maiden, Achilles lived in secret, even fathering a son, Neoptolemus, with Princess Didamia. Only his closest companion Patroclus knew his heart. The bond between Achilles and Patroclus went beyond brotherhood, often described as the sharing of one soul between two men. Agamemnon, knowing Achilles must be found, sent Odysseus to Skyros. The wily king disguised himself as a merchant, bringing fine fabrics, perfumes, and jewelry for the maidens, yet among the treasures he concealed shining weapons. While the girls eagerly admired the trinkets, one maiden instinctively reached for the sword. The ruse exposed Achilles, who did not resist. Smiling, he declared, "I would rather live one day blazing like the sun." Thus he agreed to sail for war, leading his myrmidons, the legendary ant-men, born when Zeus transformed ants into warriors for Achilles' grandfather, King Aeacus. When Achilles and his black-armored myrmidons arrived at Aulis, Agamemnon rejoiced. To him, this was the sharpest spear and the strongest shield of the entire alliance. Soon, kings and princes from across Greece gathered. Agamemnon, High King of Mycenae, his brother Menelaus, King of Sparta, cunning Odysseus of Ithaca, mighty Ajax, the great of Salamis, towering like a living wall, Diomedes of Argos, favored by Athena, and the famed archer Philoctetes, who carried the bow of Heracles tipped with the Hydra's venom. Countless others answered the oath, swelling the host into the mighty. Yet, when the fleet prepared to sail, the winds died. For days the ships sat stranded in the harbor of Aulis. A seer revealed the cause. Agamemnon had once offended Artemis, goddess of the hunt, and only the sacrifice of his daughter Iphigenia could appease her. Torn between duty and love, Agamemnon at last summoned the girl. But at the final moment, Artemis intervened, sparing Iphigenia and carrying her away to. The goddess sent favorable winds. Before departure, a portent appeared. A serpent slithered up a tree and devoured 9 baby birds before turning to stone. The seer Kalkas interpreted this as a sign the war would last 9 years, and in the prophecy steeled the Greeks. With 1,000 ships covering the sea, they sailed eastward. But fate struck again when the great archer Philoctetes was bitten by a venomous snake at a sacred shrine. His wound festered, stinking so foully that the army abandoned him on the island of Lemnos, leaving him with only his bow. Alone, he endured his exile for 10 years, until destiny would call him back at the war's darkest hour. At last, the Greeks landed on the shores of Asia Minor. Before them stood Troy, the strongest fortress of the known world, founded by Ilus, grandson of Zeus, and strengthened by Apollo and Poseidon themselves. Its walls were said to be unbreakable. Within the city was the Palladium, a sacred statue of Athena said to guarantee Troy's safety as long as it remained. The city stood on high ground, protected by strong allies and commanding the gateway between. This was why Agamemnon had summoned every hero of Greece. No single king could conquer Troy alone. Only together, bound by oath, ambition, and vengeance, could they hope to break the city of Priam. And so began. That morning, a veil of mist still clung to the sea as the Greek fleet approached the shores of Troy. But waiting on the sands stood the Trojan army, already arrayed for battle, led by Hector, the eldest son of King Priam. Hector was not only the crown prince of Troy, but also its finest warrior, renowned for repelling invaders time and again. To his people, he embodied honor. Though a man of peace, it was Hector who now stood at the front lines, prepared to defend his homeland. On the Greek ships, silence hung heavy. No warrior dared leap ashore, for a prophecy had declared, "He who first sets foot upon Trojan soil will be the first to die by Hector's spear." An entire coalition of princes and thousands of soldiers stood frozen in fear. Suddenly, Odysseus leapt forward, pretending to disembark. The host stirred, thinking the spell was broken, until a young warrior, Protesilas, cried out and truly sprang onto the beach. Before he could steady his footing, Hector rushed like a storm, and his spear struck the Greek down. Protesilaus fell, blood soaking the sand, the prophecy fulfilled. Only then did all realize Odysseus had tricked them. He had merely cast his shield onto the shore and stepped upon it. Battle erupted in earnest. From dawn to dusk, the two armies clashed with savage fury. Losses were heavy on both sides, yet by nightfall the Greeks had gained no ground. They withdrew to the plain, pitched camp by the sea, and braced themselves. Agamemnon, high king of the Greeks, saw the futility of a direct assault. Instead, he ordered his armies to raid Troy's allies throughout Asia Minor, isolating the city by cutting off its lifelines. Two of Greece's greatest champions volunteered, Achilles and Ajax the Great. Achilles led his Myrmidons southward, storming town after town. Under his command, 11 cities fell and 12 islands were conquered in the space of 9 years. His name alone spread terror when he captured the city of Lynnessus. He claimed as his prizes Briseis, a princess, and Chryseis, daughter of a priest of Apollo. At Lesbos, famed for its strong defenses, the princess fell in love with Achilles and betrayed her own city. Yet, when victory was assured, Achilles executed her as a warning against treachery. To his enemies, he became like a raging fire that consumed all. Meanwhile, Ajax campaigned in Thrace and Phrygia. In Thrace, he forced Polymestor, Priam's son-in-law, to surrender the young Trojan prince Polydorus. Instead of protecting the boy, Ajax sold him into slavery. In Phrygia, Ajax fought the king Teletas in a duel that raged for 100 passes of the spear before Ajax struck him down and seized the land. Thus, by the end of the 9th year, nearly all Troy's allies had been destroyed, leaving the city an isolated fortress amid a sea of fire. When the Greeks regrouped on the shore, Agamemnon distributed spoils among the princes. Chryseis was given to Agamemnon himself, while Briseis went to Achilles. Unlike a mere slave, Briseis was treated by Achilles with tenderness. She shared his table, his bed, and even won the affection of Patroclus, who cared for her like a sister. In time, she returned Achilles' love, forgetting her sorrow and pledging herself to him. But fate intervened. Chryses, father of Chryseis and priest of Apollo, came to the Greek camp offering ransom for his daughter's freedom. Agamemnon scorned him, insulted him, and threatened him with violence. Humiliated, the old man prayed to Apollo, who sent plague upon the Greek host. Warriors collapsed in fever, dying by the hundreds. At last, the seer Calchas declared the truth. The army would not be spared until Chryseis was released. Agamemnon grudgingly returned her, but in rage at his loss, he declared before the army, "To repay me, I shall take the prize of another." And with that, he seized Briseis from Achilles. Fury consumed the son of Thetis. Drawing his sword, he nearly struck Agamemnon down on the spot, but was restrained by Patroclus. Instead, Achilles swore a bitter oath. "From this day, I shall fight no more. Let the Greeks fall and perish without me." With that, he withdrew to his tent. Without Achilles, the Greeks faltered, their morale broken, they suffered defeat after. At last, to break the stalemate, both sides agreed to a duel that might end the war without further bloodshed. Menelaus, husband of Helen, challenged Paris, her abductor. If Paris fell, Troy would return Helen. If Menelaus died, Paris accepted, yet when he stood on the battlefield, his courage failed. His sword hand trembled, and after only a few exchanges, Menelaus struck him down and dragged him by the helmet. But as Menelaus raised his blade for the killing blow, Paris cried out in terror. Suddenly, Aphrodite enveloped him in a mist and spirited him away to Troy. The duel ended in disgrace, the truce shattered, and war resumed in fury. When Paris crept back into the palace, Helen met him with scorn. "Better you had died with honor," she spat, "than return alive as a coward." With Achilles gone, another hero rose to prominence. Diomedes, king of Argos. Favored by Athena, he fought like a lion among sheep. On the field, he slew Pandarus, one of Troy's finest archers, with a spear thrust through his chest. Soon after, he faced Aeneas, cousin of Hector and son of Aphrodite. Though half divine, Aeneas was gravely wounded, and Aphrodite herself descended to rescue him. But Athena strengthened Diomedes' arm, and his spear pierced even the flesh of the goddess. Golden ichor, not blood, flowed from her hand, and flowers bloomed where it fell. Then Ares, god of war, thundered onto the battlefield in wrath, but Athena guided Diomedes once more. His spear drove into the belly of Ares, and even the god cried out in pain, retreating to the heavens in humiliation. When Apollo himself appeared to protect Aeneas, he warned Diomedes, "Mortal, do not raise your hand against me." The earth shook at his voice, and Diomedes dared not press further. On Olympus, Zeus thundered in anger at the meddling of the gods. From this hour, he declared, "Let none of you interfere directly in mortal war, or I will cast you." The gods fell silent. But the war below raged on, fiercer than ever. After Diomedes wounded, even the gods themselves, fear spread among the Trojans. Envoys came to the Greek camp bearing gifts of gold and silver, offering to return all that Paris had stolen except Helen. Diomedes laughed aloud. This war is no longer for a single woman, it is the fate of Troy itself. Terrified, the envoy Soon Hector himself rode forth from Troy, halting between the armies. He raised his voice, "I am Hector, son of Priam. Let any Greek who dares face me in single combat step forward." Silence held the Greek lines. Even Agamemnon and Odysseus hesitated. Without Athena's protection, Diomedes would not answer. At last Ajax, the great prince of Salamis, strode forth with his massive sevenfold shield. The two champions fought fiercely. Hector's spear struck again and again, but could not pierce Ajax's layered hide shield. They hurled stones, and Ajax's cast nearly toppled Hector. Yet night drew near, and the elders of both armies raised the white flag of truce. Hector declared, "Ajax, you are a worthy foe. I honor you." He presented Ajax with a silver-hilted sword, and Ajax in turn gave Hector a crimson war belt. They clasped hands, sworn enemies but respectful warriors. For one brief night, at dawn, the Trojans launched a surprise assault. A band of warriors crept into the Greek camp, setting fire to the ships. Chaos erupted. Soldiers fell by the hundreds. Patroclus, heartbroken at the sight, begged Achilles, "If you will not fight, then lend me your armor. I will rally the men in your name and drive the Trojans back." Achilles consented. Patroclus donned the gleaming armor, helmet, and spear of his friend, and when he rode forth, the Trojans believed Achilles himself had returned. Fear swept them, and they fled to the city walls. Patroclus pressed on, killing many, even Sarpedon, prince of Lycia and son of Zeus. From Olympus, Zeus wept to see his mortal son fall, but did not intervene, for fate had spoken. He sent a rainstorm to honor. At last, Patroclus met Hector before the gates of Troy. They clashed fiercely, but Patroclus grew weary, his limbs heavy. Hector seized the moment and drove his spear into Patroclus's chest. As he fell, dust covered his face. Hector rejoiced, believing he had slain Achilles, but when he removed the helmet, he froze. It was not Achilles, but Patroclus. Word of Patroclus's death reached Achilles like thunder. He collapsed in grief, tearing his hair. "My brother, my dearest friend, my other soul, you are gone because of me, because I refuse to fight." Odysseus persuaded Agamemnon to return Briseis to Achilles, ending their feud. Briseis herself wept over Patroclus. "You were like a brother to me, who taught me Greek, who promised to see me wed as a wife, not a slave. And now..." Achilles swore vengeance. Forged anew in armor made by Hephaestus, he returned to battle like a god of war unleashed. His fury was beyond mortal measure. He cut down Trojans by the thousands, hurling corpses into the river Scamander until its waters ran red with blood. The river god rose in anger, nearly drowning him, but Hephaestus sent fire. The gods themselves descended into war, Athena against Ares, Hera against Artemis, Poseidon against Apollo, until Zeus thundered from Olympus and forbade them further meddling. Achilles pushed on. On Troy's walls, Hector looked down and knew the moment had come. He embraced his wife Andromache and infant son for the last time. Then he went forth to meet his destiny. When he saw Achilles, fear seized him and he fled. 3 times they circled Troy in pursuit, until at last Hector turned to face his fate. They clashed in the dust, shield against shield, bronze against bronze. Hector fought bravely, but Achilles, swift as fire, struck a fatal. As Hector lay dying, he begged, "Do not leave my body to the dogs, grant me honor in death." But Achilles' rage was merciless. He pierced Hector's ankles, bound him to his chariot, and dragged his body in the dust around Troy's walls. Priam, Andromache, and all the Trojans wailed as their champion. That night, Priam himself crept into the Greek camp, disguised in rags. Falling at Achilles' feet, he kissed the hands that had slain his son. "I ask no mercy for myself. I beg only for my child's body." Achilles, moved by the old king's grief, relented. He returned Hector's body, cleansed and shrouded with dignity. For a time, both armies paused to mourn. Soon, a new host came to Troy's aid, the Amazons, led by their queen Penthesilea, daughter of Ares. Trained from birth in war, she fought with fury, cutting down Greeks until the rivers ran red again. But at last she failed. When he removed her helmet, he froze. Beneath the armor was a woman of surpassing beauty. For a moment, regret pierced his heart. A Greek named Thersites mocked him for weakness, and Achilles, enraged. Not long after, Memnon, king of Ethiopia and son of Eos, goddess of the dawn, brought his dark armies to Troy. Tall and radiant in armor forged by Hephaestus, Memnon slew many Greeks. But Achilles met him in battle, and after a long struggle, Achilles' spear pierced Memnon's heart. The Ethiopians fled, and Eos wept for her son. Exultant, Achilles pressed on to Troy's very gates. But there Paris lay in wait, guided by Apollo. From the battlements he loosed an arrow, and the shaft struck Achilles in his one vulnerable spot, the heel. With a cry that shook the plain, the greatest of Greek heroes fell. The Greeks fought desperately to recover his body. Ajax the Great bore him from the field, while Odysseus defended the retreat. In the camp, Thetis, his mother, rose from the sea in grief. His ashes were placed in a golden urn, buried beside those of Patroclus. Thetis brought forth Achilles' armor, declaring it should go to the most deserving hero. Some favored Ajax, who had carried the body through battle. Others argued for Odysseus, whose cunning saved the host. In the end, the Greeks awarded the armor to Odysseus. Shamed and maddened, Ajax fell into despair. Athena clouded his mind, and in his frenzy he slaughtered livestock, believing them to be his enemies. When he awoke and saw his disgrace, he fell upon his own sword, the very gift Hector had once given him, and as the war dragged on, prophecy declared that Troy could not fall without the bow of Heracles, which lay with Philoctetes, abandoned years before on the island of Lemnos. The Greeks had deserted him when a serpent's bite left his wound festering. Now Odysseus and Diomedes sailed to Lemnos. Odysseus, ever cunning, tried to persuade Philoctetes, but the wounded hero rebuked him. "You were the first to betray me. I will not listen to your lies." Then Diomedes approached with humility. He confessed, "I too have been wronged by the Greeks. If you will not fight for them, then give." Philoctetes listened in silence. At last, he surrendered the bow. But Diomedes' conscience smote him. He returned and knelt. "I deceived you. The truth is that Greece needs you, not me. Without you..." That night, in a dream, Heracles appeared to Philoctetes. "Take up my bow once more." At dawn, Philoctetes agreed. He was brought to the Greek camp, and the sons of Asclepius healed his wound. Restored, he rose, strong again, ready to take his place in the final act of the war. With Philoctetes now among the Greeks, hope blazed anew. One day, in the midst of fierce fighting, he drew Heracles' bow and loosed an arrow tipped with the Hydra's venom. The shaft struck Paris in the abdomen. Though the wound seemed shallow, black blood poured forth, and the poison spread swiftly through his body. His skin turned pale. In desperation, Paris ordered his men to carry him to Mount Ida, where the nymph Oenone, his first love, still lived. Long ago, before he won Helen, Paris had loved Oenone, who alone knew how to heal Hydra's poison. But he had abandoned her, and her heart had hardened with 10 years of grief. When Paris was laid before her, writhing in agony, he begged for mercy. Yet Oenone, bitter and unyielding, turned away. Carried down the mountain, Paris breathed his last before he reached the foot. His body. But as the pyre still smouldered, Oenone appeared in white robes. Overcome with remorse, she threw herself into the flames and perished beside him. Still Troy held, for within its walls stood the sacred Palladium, the statue of Athena said to guarantee the city's survival. Odysseus proposed a bold plan to steal the idol and to bring to battle Neoptolemus, the young son of Achilles, whose presence would reignite the Greek spirit. Disguised as a beggar, Odysseus slipped into Troy under cover of night. Passing through the streets, he was recognized by none except Helen. From her balcony, she called softly, "Do not fear, Odysseus. I will not betray you. They say I came here for love, but truly I was deceived by Aphrodite. My heart has never left Menelaus, nor our daughter Hermione. If you seek the Palladium, it lies in Athena's temple, but shed no blood in her shrine, or you will rouse the goddess's wrath." That night, Odysseus entered the temple, knelt, and silently took the statue. Odysseus then sailed to Scyros, where Neoptolemus, son of Achilles, and Didymia was being raised. The boy was only 14, tall and bright-eyed, already eager for glory. "I have long awaited this day," he declared. "I will finish the path my father began." Odysseus presented him with Achilles' armor. Neoptolemus donned it with pride, believing himself already a hero. Yet Odysseus, watching, thought grimly, "The boy is fierce." Neoptolemus soon proved his valor, slaying Eurypylus, the great ally from the Hittites, and scattering Trojan forces. Yet his ferocity grew bloodthirsty, and Odysseus foresaw danger in the boy's unchecked rage. At last, the Greeks turned to their most cunning stratagem. They built a colossal wooden horse, towering as high as the city walls, hollowed within to conceal their finest warriors. The rest of the army feigned a retreat. When the Trojans discovered the empty shore and the abandoned horse, debate raged. Some urged burning it, others breaking it apart, still others declaring it and offering to Athena. A captured Greek Sinon claimed it was a sacred gift built to atone for Agamemnon's offense against the goddess. If brought into Troy, it would bring her favor. Priam was persuaded. The horse was dragged into the city amid celebration. That night, feasts and music filled the streets. At midnight, while the Trojans slept, a panel in the horse's belly opened. Odysseus and his chosen warriors climbed out, slew the guards, and opened the gates. The Greek host, which had hidden behind the nearby island of Tenedos, Troy awoke to fire and slaughter. The city that had stood for centuries burned in a single night. Blood ran in the streets. Priam was slain at his own altar by Neoptolemus. Astyanax, the infant son of Hector, was hurled from the walls. Andromache was taken into slavery. Cassandra, seized in Athena's temple, was dragged off by Agamemnon. Helen, found in her chamber, was nearly killed by Menelaus, but Odysseus intervened, reminding him that she had aided the Greeks and never truly forgotten her husband. Thus, after 10 years of war, The gods were enraged by the Greeks' brutality, even those who had once supported them. Calamity followed. Agamemnon, returning with Cassandra, was murdered by his wife Clytemnestra, who had never forgiven him for sacrificing their daughter Iphigenia. Cassandra too was slain, her prophecies ignored. Ajax the Lesser, who had defiled Cassandra in Athena's temple, was destroyed at sea. Athena hurled a storm upon his fleet, and Poseidon struck his ship with a thunderbolt. Menelaus and Helen were blown to Egypt, where they lived for years before finally returning. Odysseus wandered for 10 more years, cursed by Poseidon for blinding his son Polyphemus, until at last he came home to Ithaca, as told in Diomedes, though spared disaster at sea, returned to Argos only to find his wife faithless. Betrayed, he fled to Italy, where he founded cities and was later honored as a hero. But one Trojan survived with destiny still upon him. Aeneas, son of Anchises and Aphrodite, carried his aged father on his back and led his son Ascanius by the hand. With him he bore the household gods of Troy. Guided by prophecy, he sailed westward, enduring many trials before reaching Italy. There he made alliance with the native peoples and laid the foundation for a new city. His descendants would one day establish Rome, an empire greater than Troy had ever been, and the ashes of a fallen city would become the seed of another destined to rule the world. Troy fell. Yet in its fall, it did not simply end. The burning towers, the wailing women, the shattered gates, these did not vanish into silence. They became memory, myth, and warning. For generations after, poets would speak of the city by the Scamander, where once proud kings ruled, where lovers defied gods, where warriors clashed until the earth itself shook with rage. The sack of Troy was not only the destruction of a city, it was the destruction of a vision of permanence. Troy had stood for centuries, trading with distant lands guarded by mighty walls said to have been raised by the hands of Poseidon himself. Yet in a single night, with fire and treachery, all was undone. The Greeks, though they called themselves victors, carried home not only spoils but curses. Their triumph was steeped in blood, their return paths haunted by storms, betrayals, and deaths. Agamemnon was murdered, Ajax drowned, Odysseus wandered. The lesson was clear: no one truly wins in war. The war began not with armies but with desire. A shepherd prince, offered the gifts of goddesses, chose love over wisdom and power. Paris's choice seemed simple, even harmless. Yet the weight of nations. Helen's beauty became both a crown and a curse. Men saw in her not merely a woman but a symbol worth killing for. Yet beauty is fleeting, and the war it sparked consumed more lives than any jewel, any kingdom, any treasure. And in Oenone's refusal to save Paris, another truth is revealed. Love, once betrayed, can harden into cruelty. Paris died not only because of Heracles' poisoned arrow, but because of the wound. Thus, the war teaches that human choices, even private, intimate choices, ripple outward until they shape the destiny of nations. From the very birth of Paris, Cassandra foresaw ruin. From the day Helen left Sparta, omens warned of calamity. From the first duel beneath the walls, the gods themselves spoke through signs and dreams. Yet mortals, blinded by pride, ignored them all. Cassandra's curse to always speak the truth but never be believed stands as one of the most tragic symbols of human folly. In every age, there are Cassandras, voices of warning, whispering of dangers ahead, only to be silenced or mocked until it is too late. Troy's ashes ask us, will we listen to our Cassandras, or will we, like Priam's court, laugh at their words and was Troy doomed by human passions or by divine will? Achilles' wrath Agamemnon's arrogance, Hector's honor, Paris's desire all played their part. Yet above them loomed Athena, Hera, and Aphrodite, manipulating men as pawns. Zeus, aloof yet amused, let the scales tip first one way. But perhaps the gods themselves were mirrors of human weakness. Hera's jealousy, Athena's pride, Aphrodite's vanity, are these not human traits magnified? If so, then perhaps the war was never divine punishment at all, but humanity confronting its own reflection. This tension between destiny and free will gives the story its timeless power. Are we fated to repeat the same mistakes, or can we choose differently? Troy whispers no answer, only leaves the question burning in our minds. For 10 years, men sought Clio's eternal glory. They sought their names sung by poets, carved into memory. Achilles chose a short life of fame over a long life of obscurity. Hector chose to fight, though he knew it meant death. Odysseus. And yet, what is the value of such glory? Troy burned, but did Achilles' name not outlast its flames? Is Hector's fall not remembered with more reverence than Agamemnon's triumph? The paradox of glory is this: it demands death to secure immortality. The lesson is bitter. To be remembered, men must destroy. To be sung, they. Though men fought, it was women who. Hecuba, once queen, now a slave. Cassandra, dragged from Athena's. Helen, blamed by all. Their sorrow was no less heroic than any spear thrust. In their mourning songs, the world remembers not only how Troy was lost, but what was lost with it. Cities burn quickly, but grief. In truth, the Trojan women became the true poets of the war. Through their laments, humanity learned what conquest really means. Not all was ash. In the chaos, Aeneas carried his father and his gods from the flames. Though Troy perished, its spirit lived on in him. His journey to Italy, his battles, his alliances, these became the foundation. The message is clear. From destruction, new worlds may be born. Troy's death was not an ending, but a transformation. Perhaps this is the final consolation. No fire, however great, can consume. The Trojan War endures because it is more than history or myth. It is a mirror in which nations fall when desire can topple empire. The innocent suffer. Prophecy is ignored. The victors of today may. Each retelling is not just a story of the past, but a warning for the present. Troy reminds us that no wall is unbreakable, no king. And so, we stand at the smoking ruins of Troy. The towers are gone, the songs of Priam's court silenced, the heroes buried or scattered, yet something lingers. The dust does not settle. It drifts into the lungs of history, carried forward by poets, by storytellers, by those. We ask, did Troy truly fall, or does it live still in every city that believes itself eternal? Will we too ignore our Cassandras? Will our own walls one day echo with the cries of women, the clash of fire, the silence of gods who do not intervene? The Trojan War does not end with Troy's ashes. It ends with us whenever we retell it, whenever we see in it our own reflection, whenever we wonder if we too are. Perhaps that is why the poets never truly close the tale, because Troy's end is not an end.